All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of y'all and peace out to the rest of you. I want to be speaking in defense of several people. Go ahead and hit the share button on this one because the message is more important than the messenger. And I'll start by telling you all that when I said that Islam was a solution for individuals and for groups of people, there were certain things I was talking about. One of them was conflict resolution. When you have an actual system in place, legal and spiritual, and social, then there are a lot of things that are just not guaranteed to never pop up, but they're guaranteed to not overwhelm you. And that's what I was getting at. But when I said that MLS women were going to have to de-westernize, much like men already have to do, it didn't mean just that you got to become Muslim. Granted, as a matter of fact, it didn't mean that. Granted, that's something you would need to do for the best situation in this life and in the hereafter, certainly. But in terms of talking about just an endogamous community or an optionally endogamous community, that is a necessity whether you become Muslim or not. For the men and for the women. It's just that the men already know. Black admixed or black unmixed men already know. White men know. You got to de-westernize to a certain extent. Now, one of the things is conflict resolution. And in the interest of that, and in the interest of being fair, I'm going to show you one of the ways that this works. Some people, even those who have conflicts with each other, are going to be included in me speaking in their defense. And they don't even know that I'm going to do this. I did not ask permission from anyone in whose defense I'm now about to speak. And I didn't tell them I'm about to speak in their defense. And I'm not really doing it just to win favor with them. I'm speaking in their defense because, well, it's the right thing to do, and it's an example for us in terms of conflict resolution and conflict prevention. And one person who I can't stand and who can't stand me, I will also speak partially in her defense because it's the right thing to do. Again, I'm not bragging because, see, I'm not telling you that I'm wise. I'm telling you that I've had wise teachers. I've had wise parents. Still have them, and I thank God I got them. And I've had wise teachers, secularly and religiously, in and outside of classrooms, including my wife. God bless her, and she can't hear me saying this now. Including my girlfriend, too. That's my wife, so if anybody's thinking, oh, he got a side piece, no, she's the main squeeze. My girlfriend and wife are the same woman, so don't y'all get any ideas. And I wish the same for you all, which is why I talk about the manosphere stuff I talk about. Which is why I say to the men, leave the West. They're not going to change, so leave. Because at least you got a shot at it here. In the West, you hardly have a shot. Unless you're just lucky and you know the right people, you don't have a shot at it over there. It's not an option. Let's not lie about it. So that being said, I'm going to start by speaking in defense of Fran Brown. See, my defense of someone does not mean I automatically agree with everything that they do. That's not it. But I'm going to talk about specific things wherein I know that they're right and probably unrecognized for it. And some of these folks don't like each other much. Fran Brown, I told you all, was not a troll. I'm not here to say I told you so, but I told you so. I didn't say she was always right. I didn't say she was always wrong. What I was telling you all is that the evidence is that she is honest. Now, if she said anything wrong about the person with whom she was involved in a grudge, and I say was because, frankly, she's been vindicated, meaning Fran has been vindicated by the evidence which came from other sources. Fran, if she got anything wrong, she got it wrong because someone gave it to her. She was not just some obsessed psychopath that was trailing someone around like what the object of such scrutiny said. Someone told her this stuff, and she was sitting on that evidence, photographic evidence. I know. You see, when in someone's live stream, she began to sit up and say certain things, and then the object of her scrutiny began to say, oh, she's an enemy to light-skinned people, and she's a black supremacist, and she's obsessed with me, and a psychopath. She began to say, no, you did say X, Y, and Z, and so this wound up happening. Each one told me. The object of her scrutiny actually addressed me first. And I said, I'm going to follow the evidence. You got any? That what you say about Fran is true? Fran, you got any evidence what you say about her is true? Guess who reached out to me? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the one on the other side of the grudge. Guess who showed me evidence? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the one on the other side. No. But what I learned that day was that Fran definitely was not a psychopathically obsessed troll like she was characterized to be. She believed it because someone had shown her evidence. I can't guarantee that none of it was ever doctored by anybody, but I've seen evidence as well that Fran doesn't have the technical savvy to do stuff like doctor it, make it up, whatever somebody might say, or even to screen share it on a live stream. I think she just figured it out. I'm not saying this to even troll Fran right now. I'm saying this to say that this is evidence in her favor. I mean, fair is fair. It's probably as close to absolute proof as what we'll get. I made myself seem like an interesting target for anybody that just had an obsessive personality. She didn't take the bait. Told y'all she ain't no troll. The evidence that's circulating, well, turns out several people had it. Next, I'm going to speak in defense of MRM and Mrs. Golden, because even despite the evidence that the object of Fran's scrutiny did in fact lie about origin or identity, despite that, I don't blame them for rocking with her when they first did. Because apparently, at least one of them was sent some evidence, although it was not proof, some evidence. It was at least a photograph identified as a grandparent of the object of such scrutiny. They had no evidence to the contrary. She had shown herself to be at least loyal and advocating for them, so they went with what they had at the time. Now, could either one of them have handled the request for evidence better or the allegations better? I guess they could have. I guess both of them could have, but this is probably, their channels are relatively new. So this is probably their training for YouTube grudges and beefs. Now, granted, I'm sure they'll have a better idea as to what to do next time, but this is the beginning for them. Now, the one with whom they rocked, because they really could look and see her rocking with them, is more experienced with this, and therefore knew how to be deceptive. And I don't understand. I'm not saying that the object of the scrutiny should have ever doxed herself. I'm not saying she should have ever doxed herself. We're upset if we remember and keep our wits about us. We're upset rightfully so because of the deception, not because of the description or because of the origin. Keep that in mind. It's the deception. So while we were hearing about how everybody else was unambiguous and lying and not telling the truth about, and everybody else was a black supremacist and all this stuff, it turned out that one of the main ones to say this about several other people was, in fact, not telling the truth about herself. And we saw that, the video's now going out for most of us, and what we've seen is, in actuality, as a matter of fact, we saw this. How she handled the conflict with a man the same way she handled rejection during a contest, an audition. Over talking, flipping it, reprojection or reflection, deflection, same thing. Just all kinds of attitude. Now, the thing is that, again, as I've said, Mrs. Gigi and MRM, though they are products of the West, that environment which does socialize everyone a certain way, or certain ways, I should say, they still made every attempt, despite that, to be fair to men, to be fair to all descriptions and phenotypes and genotypes. And they should get credit for it. Now, if someone can come along and say to me, if I'm wrong about this, understand, I'm talking about what I have seen. Nobody's had time to sit through every single live stream, and not every live stream is even available for viewing now. But I'm talking about what I myself have seen. And if somebody's going to come along and say, well, you're naive and you need to know X, Y, and Z, if you can send me a link or a screenshot with a timestamp to evidence of the contrary, then I will listen. But if you don't have that, then keep your mouth closed. Fair is fair. I want to make this plain, because I asked for evidence the first time, and the only one that got triggered by me taking that stance was the one that did not show or send any evidence. And the one that said that's fair, actually, and I appreciate that, you being fair, was the one that was able to show some evidence and was honest about what they did not have as evidence. Said, I know even more, but I'm not going to go through all of that because I don't have the evidence for it, even though I witnessed it. So I'm going to shut my mouth about it. And I'm not going to sit up here and blame Mrs. Golden or MRM for things that other people have said in their comments, in their chats, or on their panels. Now, maybe they could be more aggressive when people said things that were mean. Maybe not. I'm not really sure, because I don't know everything that everyone said. I'm not sure they know everything that everybody wrote in chats, because they go by quickly. And the more subscribers they get and the bigger audience they get, the faster these things go by. I've seen that myself in my own experience. So I know that happens. You don't catch everything, you catch a lot of it. When they go and they read the comments, they don't have time to read every single solitary one. And I understand that. So I'm not going to blame them for what some others said. Some people would say, well, they let folks say some things and not say others. And as I've said, that may or may not be true. But if you're going to tell me this, that's fine if you back it up with some evidence. And if the evidence is not there, but you remember seeing it, don't worry about it. Because when I get more time, I'll see it. And I'll tell the truth about whatever I saw. That's the fair thing to do. Next, I want to speak, so that's 3 people. I'm also going to speak in defense of Hybrid. Y'all can like him, you can hate him. What I can say is that much of what you can learn from him, you're going to have to learn in the conversation. I don't think and granted, he's relatively new to this too. I mean, I think he's been on, I remember seeing a name similar to that and a similar icon a year ago. I don't think it's the exact same account as now, but in terms of making content, yeah, that's a new thing. I mean, he's new at this as well. Now, should he explain it better? He can. It depends on the kind of time he has. Does he have that kind of time? I don't really know much about what his schedule's like. What I do know is that when you actually do engage with him, and mind you, we're several hours apart from each other, several time zones. So there's a narrow window of time that is a decent hour for both of us. But and there are many days when we cannot. But if you can engage with him and you just simply ask him what's the evidence or to back it up, he's actually pretty fair most of the time. And he'll say, well, if you're looking for evidence, here's the link. I've done this, and what I learned is that even though he may say things we think on the surface, and I don't blame y'all for thinking so on the surface, even though he says things that we think on the surface are anti-someone or anti-somebody else, you ask him, there's evidence for it. He's not making it up, just like Fran wasn't making up the stuff she said. And now we know that. It's the same with Hybrid. See, Hybrid didn't make up the stuff that he said, even about the same object of Fran's scrutiny. And it turns out now it's going around. And it's like, oh, you know what? There's actually evidence for this. Dang. It wasn't even hidden. Oh my God. You see what's going on? So I think some people thought that he was a troll probably because of the voice. It's a unique voice, and some people think it's an altered voice. And that may be why some people thought it was a troll, plus he's new. But in actuality, and understand this, some of these folks I mentioned have grudges with each other. I get that. And they're capable of handling these grudges with each other or not. And if they choose to ask me to be a mediator, I can actually help them solve this. But what I wanted to point out right now is that these are the things that are working in their defense. And this is what I'm going public with. I'm not willing to violate either one's privacy, but I did want the public to understand the things that are in their favor. Where we disagree, where we might even have to correct each other, whether it's Hybrid and me, or whether it's Miss Golden and me, or MRM and me, or Fran and me. We got ways to do this without embarrassing each other in the public. And mind you, I'm not capable of feeling embarrassment anymore. I've lost that sensation a long time ago. But I still don't want others to go through it. So we got methods and means, and for the ladies, I would say it's semi-private. Semi-private means that we have to do this, because it's not okay for me to slide in the DMs of a lady as a married man. Now, if one of them sends me a DM to talk about something without bringing it public and we'll work this out on our own, then I'll respond. But it's not okay for me as a married man to go in and DM another lady directly. And if I do, then I need to keep screenshot to prove that neither she nor I said anything inappropriate. But, what I'm getting at here is that when we do have disagreements, and I'm saying this to all of you, when we have them, we have ways we can deal with them without just going on YouTube and flinging them at each other. And this is something that is actually systemic and inherent in what I've told you all is the solution for individuals or communities. Did I not? So, sorry about the noise, but God bless my wife. I didn't even ask, and she's over there cooking something. And I know exactly what it is. God bless her. I didn't request it, and she has every right to just walk in and say, man, I'm sleepy, and turn in. So, and that's the thing. Remind me to come back and talk about, remind me to explain what that has to do with this whole gender issue, by the way, because I plan on touching on that in here too. Now, so that's 4 folks in whose defense I've spoken so far. And I'm not trying to give up anyone's privacy, so that's why I'm very vague in the things that I say. But I'm very clear in my understanding of what they are. And I want you to know what works in these folks' favor. Because one of the things that can help to prevent a grudge, not disagreements and differences of opinion, but outright grudges, is when you know the good things about someone and when you don't assume the worst. Now, I saw things Hybrid said, but I didn't assume the worst possible interpretation of the things he said. I asked him. It may have even irritated him at some points, because I know I had plenty of questions, but I asked him. And I learned something that is very important. If I agree, if I disagree, I know that he's not at least just making these things up, coming with them out of nowhere. I've listened to Golden. I've listened to MRM, and I've learned that they have every intention of being fair. I know that there's some of the programming of the environment in which we grew up that's still in them that does not push for fairness and justice to men. I also know that they are not willing to give in to that consciously. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And I respect them for that effort. And this is why, where I might disagree with anyone who I've mentioned, we gonna work this out in private first, or semi-private, as best we can, which is also going to be appropriate and respectful to my wife and husbands or fiancés of any of the ladies. But we have ways we can work this out. But out in public, I can tell you these good things about them. Because everybody, we have to understand that in this mudslinging, you can disagree, but can you at least make the best possible assumption about someone's intentions until you can see clear ill intent, like lying? And that's the other thing. See, I'm not upset that the object of Fran's scrutiny and later on the object of other people's investigations and evidence is not of any black admixture from what people who know her have said. I'm upset about the lying. And it was partially for this reason that I let two men in the sphere take a look at me. Very quickly, briefly, but take a look at me and see me move on camera so that they would know that I at least did not lie about my origin or description. Now, I don't have a DNA test. I'm not saying I never took one, but at least that I did not lie about my description, at the very least. That was part of the reason I did it. But you see, the other thing too to understand is that as we are discussing this stuff in the sphere, remember what the priorities are. And this is important. 20 minutes and 25 seconds in, timestamp this to send to some other people that are involved in grudges and gripes. Remember the priorities. It is safety and just treatment offline and online. And what this also means is that others are safe from being harmed by us if they don't provoke it. And others are safe from being unfairly treated by us. That's also what it means. We will treat people, we will treat other groups fairly. We will be treated fairly. We will treat each other fairly internally. And we will be safe from others, but we also will be safe to others as long as they allow that. That's what the priority is, offline and online, with the option of endogamy and no shame for it, in order to self-sustain the community from within. That's what the priority was. And if we're going to keep letting folks derail us, then that's where the problem is going to come in. Now understand, we've had some sources, usually not even content creators, but people in chats, that have turned these priorities and derailed them with so-and-so ain't even telling the truth about how they look. And yet they're willing to show themselves. So at least you can say, okay, yeah, maybe they did or maybe they didn't. But yet and still. So you got people that are showing themselves and then saying, but don't I look like so-and-so? That means it's subjective and they really think so, at the very least. So what this means is that they're not, it's hard to say that they're actually lying as much as it is to say that that's how they view themselves. But now we have at least one person who is a content creator and derailing these things out there, known. And I'm gonna tell you, I saw the evidence myself, so yeah, that's her. And people have come forward and said that she is not of any known admixture. I saw that too, at least saw it in one comment section. Some would say, well, you know, that could have been anybody. Matter of fact, she would say that was Fran herself. Well, the thing is this, what I can tell is that there was two different brains that were typing. I can tell that that's a different brain altogether. I'm not a psychologist, but I can intuitively tell. And if you see them, you would know too. So the evidence is there. That's it. And we're upset about the lying, but now that we've got at least this knowledge that we need cleared up, we can sit up and say, okay, you know what? We're not going to sit up here and argue anymore about phenotype or genotype. We're trying to get a place that is safe for phenotype and genotype, in which it doesn't cause you to be abused. And by extension, this, whether we wanted to or not, by extension, this safety for genotypes and phenotypes with an S at the ends of them is going to have to extend to safety for those with a functional mindset, because in the end, remember, we're not escaping a genotype or a phenotype. We're escaping the dysfunctional mindset that thinks it's okay to target genotypes and phenotypes. That's what we're escaping. And that same mindset does not stop at genotypes and phenotypes. That same mindset extends to even ear size, which is genotype and phenotype again, but it also extends to functional mindsets, respect for education. That's what it extends to. Think about it. You think that somebody that's going to do anything wrong to you based on an appearance or based on parentage is going to pass up the chance to do something wrong to me because I read and write in English at the appropriate age level with the proper punctuation, differentiation between homophones, and capitalization. You think they're going to pass up on that? Oh God, no. Absolutely not. They too cool for school. And it shows now. You think they know. So when you got someone that is growing up and has that functional mindset that values education and learning, guess what? They also have to escape that dysfunctional ninja business. And this is one thing about which I do believe that Anon was telling the truth. Now, mind you, he and I are not cool. We don't like each other. And I do believe what Fran said, because she has shown that she doesn't make stuff up. And she has even said, this is how you can verify that such and such he said was a lie. But to be fair to him, and I'm even going to be fair to the object of Fran's scrutiny, the lady that's now on the outs with us. I'm going to be fair even to her and give her credit where it is due, despite the fact she and I can't stand each other, because fair is fair. And if we remember this, this will form a template for us to not only solve conflicts, but even prevent unnecessary ones while still retaining the right to think independently and agree or disagree with someone. So getting back to Anon. Anon did say that there is a greater problem also with just an overall mindset that is dysfunctional in the BC. About that, he was absolutely correct. Absolutely, he was. And we never sat up and said that he had no business advocating if he believed that this was correct because of his description, which he admitted was not of those for whom he was advocating. He admitted that. If he lied about some other stuff, he admitted that, and we don't have any reason to think he would lie about that. So, granted, we've never seen him, and then he doesn't have to show himself. He does have a responsibility to take care of his family if he has a family. So, I get that. But in the end, he did point this particular point out, and a lot of us have even gone and admitted it later. So why do we start getting obsessed with who looks a particular way instead of just simply saying, did so-and-so get caught lying about it? Because that's really the major issue. And now that somebody's on the outs for that, we can kind of breathe a sigh of relief, not because I don't like her, but because it's just wrong to do that. And we can say, okay, now we can get back to actually forming something safe and fair across the board. And in this way, even the functional mindset can be protected. Because let's be honest. See, the black community ain't just the hood. I know. I came up Huxtable. And as I came up Huxtable, there were people above us that were growing up actually Cosby. So we understand that. But because that influence is actually pervasive amongst us, especially in middle and high schools, because that is there, that hood influence is there. It's beyond its own borders amongst our population. Let's be honest. It is there. We have to come up, we have to actually and actively combat that dysfunctional mindset that then victimizes genotypes and phenotypes, really on both ends of the spectrum, to be honest. And just functional mindsets in general. I know, because growing up Huxtable, I saw in my own neighborhood, I lost some friends, or some semi-friends, or friends of friends. Not even from the bad neighborhood that was catty corner to our neighborhood, but from my own neighborhood itself. We lost a guy in the 90s. He drove down the highway to New Orleans one Mardi Gras, and he was one of several people that got shot to death in arguments, ninja arguments in the 90s. His cousin was my classmate at school on the other side of town. I remember her being depressed, and I was like, what's going on? And she told me her cousin passed away. And she even said, yeah, KT lived in your neighborhood, black man. And I was like, cuss word, that's your cousin. Yeah, dead as a doornail. And from some violence, his sister wound up being shot. You know why? When he died, she turned to drugs trying to cope with it. She became a drug addict, and she wound up owing some drug dealers some money. When her parents kicked her out the house, she could not go back in and get no money or steal anything from the house. So when she tried to get in to pay them drug dealers back, steal some stuff and pay the drug dealers back, her parents pushed her out the door because she was kicked out. They drove her in the car, the drug dealers drove her in the car, and then they actually shot her on my street. She's not dead, but she was injured. And so what I'm saying is that dysfunctional mindset is actually the major problem. And if we allow everyone with a functional attitude and that Malcolm X standard of reform as an example, or more than that, see, then we solve it. In actuality, whether you mean for this to be the case or not, the real salvation for the black community of unmixture and admixture is what you're advocating for. This is why the F I'm in it. This non-pro-black space is actually presenting one of the most pro-black options accidentally. Do you see where I'm going with this? And in order for this to be the case, you got to remember the priorities, and you have to understand that if you can start by making good assumptions about people until proven otherwise, benefit of the doubt, we can get a lot further. The one that's on the outs right now was proven to be on the outs. And that's why I'm not knocking Miss Golden and MRM for when they did rock with her, even though I didn't like her from jump. I knew, but you know what? When I finally got the evidence, I sat on it because I didn't want to inadvertently dox someone else. Someone else linked to her, but who's also a parent. Because I didn't want to lead to the inadvertent doxing of any minors. So I sat on it. Yeah. I'm not going to lie to y'all. Hybrid did the same thing, but the evidence still came out. And I know when he said, I've actually protected you, I know because I saw the evidence, I know he actually was. He said, I don't want to dox you. Hell, she'd already been mildly or in some hushed circles. But the point I'm making is that that's with proof, that's with evidence. When there's not such, can you at least extend, which is what MRM did to me, to her credit. When the object of Fran's scrutiny was starting to say things about me, she said, did you really? And I actually decided to go back and listen to what they were talking about. Now, I listened, because you don't remember everything you say, but I listened to, I found that, then I listened to what was before it, and I listened through. And I realized, okay, that wasn't actually literally by itself what I was getting at. I was talking from the standpoint of my former self from before I ever even became a parent. But since I didn't clarify that, my bad. But see, MRM actually gave the chance. And what I'm saying is that we need to do this across the board because just like MRM gave me a chance, she gave the object of Fran's scrutiny a chance. And now she knows that she can afford to give Fran a chance. I mean, she doesn't have to like her, but she at least knows that Fran did not make this stuff up. Now she knows. That's why I'm not going to knock her. She was given a chance. Giving chances. And it's a fair thing to do. She told McCham, look, people are innocent until proven guilty. Even you, and even your camp, innocent until proven guilty. Everybody is. And it's a fair thing to say. And if we can at least publicly give credit to people and handle the disagreements privately, then we're going somewhere. Now, that being said, let me go to this. Next thing. In order, if some of you want to hash out something, but you want to do it in a private manner, or if you want to hash it out publicly on a live stream, not necessarily with me, because I'm not going to entertain necessarily grudges. I will listen to a disagreement. I'll learn. But if you want to debate someone else and you want to do it in and actually in an organized fashion, then we can work out a time ahead of time for a live stream with both of you. And I will mute in that live stream. I will alternately mute mics, giving each one a chance to speak uninterrupted. In an organized fashion, I will format it. But also understand, maybe you know something. Maybe you got evidence to send me, to tell me that I was wrong about something. Evidence, not just, I saw it in evidence. Maybe you got that. You can catch me on Discord, Black Space Mind, #3384. Black, and then leave a space. Write down mind after that. I didn't know that you could have a space in these names. Mind, #3384. Now, I'm not going to give the Discord server addresses without people's permissions. And I mean permissions because it's servers. I'm not doing that. But you can reach me. You can tell me. If you know something and you got evidence for it, you can send it that way. If you say, well, look, I want to work something out about this, or I want to call this particular thing out, even if I don't hate such party. I want to call this particular practice out and put a stop to it. Or I want to reach a kind of peace agreement with someone. I'm willing to do that. Help mediate. Because I'm pretty good with diplomacy. I mean, I'm not the expert yet, but believe me, with the way y'all argue, you'll make me an expert. Quickly. Now, last thing I'm gonna say is gonna be about this gender stuff, and I was reminded of that when I heard the thumping, and I passed by the kitchen and saw that she was doing the preparation for a treat. It's one of my favorites. It's gonna be finished tomorrow. This is not something I asked her to do. Just like none of the people in whose defense I've spoken asked me to defend them. And they don't even know I'm going to do it. They're about to find out when this upload comes up, and that's it. Well, see, the same thing is the case when it comes down to, it's the same thing. It's I passed by her and she's making this treat and I didn't even ask for it. God bless her. I say this because, and this is why I deal with gender issues. It's not because I want the gender war. When I say that the men and the women really got to de-westernize to a certain extent, the thing is that it's easy for the men to understand because the westernization teaches the men that you're of a negative value, you always owe and you never deserve. That's what you're taught as men. So when you throw that off, it's a bit easier. And even then it ain't easy. You got to deprogram from certain things. Women have it a bit different. They have a lot more difficulty in de-westernizing because it teaches them you're valuable. It teaches them things that are true to an extent to which they're not. And it teaches them that to which they are entitled under conditions in which they're not entitled to these things. That's what it does. It exaggerates their value and then completely ignores yours and teaches you to ignore it and even to put it at a negative. That's what it does, gentlemen. But ladies and gentlemen, understand, when I talk about gender issues in the Goldensphere, it's because I want to prevent them from coming in. But if you don't know that these are even issues, you'll just naturally default to these same things and these same behaviors. And we'll have a situation that already has been proven to be untenable outside of the sphere and in the BC from which we come. And we do come out of it because most of us grew up under the one drop rule. And I'm not blaming you for that. That's all we knew. So what I'm gonna say is you would default to that if you're not thinking about it. And how do you know? Even men and women who mean well will default to some of these bad things. Men will default to trying too hard and in exchange for too little. Women will default to certain things like too many expectations, refusing to offer about the similarities in return or in exchange, interfering with other women's choices in men. Yeah, that's a pretty bad one there. Insisting on retaining both feminist ideas of modernity and hypergamy from before and demanding that a man be able to satisfy both. These type of things will default to them. So I got to talk about some of these things to give you the option to leave them at the door, men and women alike. And the men, we know this, we understand this. Because if we don't talk about the bad deal that the West offers by default to men, and we come into this golden sphere, guess what? We're going to be offered the same bad deal. Men, you get out there, work, you build, you do all of this. And in the end, we're going to hold you accountable. But you know what? You play stepdad over here because you don't deserve to have your own kids, especially not first. And you have no authority, but you have responsibility. And if your stepkid comes out bad, then it's your fault. But if he turns out good, then I'm the hero because I'm the mama. It will default to that and won't even think about it. Because understand, all of this ain't even necessarily just ADO stuff. I remember meeting a Liberian lady. She was talking about how her son, not so much her daughter, but how her son was getting in trouble in the States. She had to send his butt back to Liberia. I said, well, did his sister stay here? She said, oh, yeah. He went to, I think, her daughter's dad, African-American, was from Louisiana. And I've noticed Louisianans and Liberians actually get along very well. I noticed that because I partied with Liberians when I lived in Atlanta. And the African-Americans that I met that were hanging out with them were largely from, it was funny, they were from Kentucky, the Carolinas, and Louisiana. That's the funny thing. So anyway, she got with an African-American guy from Louisiana, and that was where her daughter came from. But she said something about, I blame him for my son getting in trouble because I feel like he didn't take him under his wing. And I was like, but that's not, okay, you know what? Did he have any kids before that? No? Okay, well, that's why. That's the reason. I see what that's about then. That's the Liberian system. But she still, and she's a very nice and sweet lady, but she still had that mindset. That he was responsible. No, he was supposed to be nice and fair and just to his stepson. He wasn't responsible the way that the dad would have been. It wasn't his job. What was she going to do? Praise him if her son turned out well? She probably would have, and that's the difference between her and Ados. But I have to talk about this gender stuff. And the last thing I'm saying about why we got to talk about it is because understand, it ain't just men complaining about who didn't want to take them out to the prom. There are men that might do this, but what they're really doing is they're analyzing why it was that no one would be willing to go to the prom with them. Or better yet, why they would be willing to leave the door to get out the house under their mama and dad's scrutiny with this guy, and then would go to the prom and want to leave with someone else. You know, it's not just about prom dates. It's not just that. What the men are talking about is actually the deception. Because see, my age group grew up deceived. A lot of men older than us are realizing they grew up deceived. What's happening though is that the ones that are, you know, the ones that are young enough to be our sons, like my son, who, thank God, just got the money I sent him. My son grew up from 10 because 10 is when I began to really tell him what to expect. And I didn't even know the word red pill at that point. I told him about the hybristophilia and the way that women are very hyper scrutinous of boys and men. And then I knew what red pill was in 2012, and I told him even more stuff then. So 9.5 years ago. And yeah, you know, he came up knowing early on. And I know he told some of his boys. Then he got to a point where he didn't have to tell them because they were learning already through YouTube and other forms of social media and their uncles and aunts' experiences. They learned. And see, the thing is that my son has had a bitter lesson that he's had to learn, and that even the ladies in his life who have been good to him, that are related to him, still don't want to even so much as consider the possibility that Kevin Samuels is on to something. Now, these will be ladies that would not necessarily do the same things that the women confess to doing on Kevin Samuels' show, and yet, and still, they don't want him to know that Kevin Samuels is on to something, that these ladies are confessing. They told him, don't even watch. What he doesn't know, but he will when he hears this message because he knows about my channel. What he doesn't know is that one of the friends of the family was, you could say that she was unscrupulous in her willingness to experiment with new guys growing up. I shouldn't say growing up, but she probably would have been about 22 or 23 at that time, I think. Yeah, she was a little bit less scrupulous. She wasn't a nice person. That's the funny thing. As a person, she wasn't one of the mean women. Oh, ninja, you ain't nothing. I don't know why you with my friend. I don't know why. She wasn't like that. She wasn't messy. But when it came down to that, she was a little bit willing to experiment. And what does this mean? Well, I don't know what it means for her options now. I'm not sure. What I do know is that she was definitely one of those that did not want him to know. And he even had the nerve to say something about him being being misogynist. My son, she had the nerve to call him a misogynist because she found out that he knew some of what Kevin was saying. For that, what is she hiding? So when my son hears this, he will now know what it was and why she would say that. Son, when you hear this, do not disclose that you know this here. Keep that a secret. Because as I've said, she's not been a bad person. And if she treats you well, of course you treat her well. But you just have to understand the motives. Now you see, now those of you in the Goldensphere, you understand this is what I got to tell my son about someone he knows that's been very good to him in his childhood. And who deserves to be respected by him for the most part. But when it comes down to, and this is someone I think does love my son. He loves her as a type of aunt, but this is still someone that is not going to tell him what guys need to know about women. And until the day that things are equal between us, not just in the mating market, but definitely includingly the mating market. We got to talk about this stuff. And if you want a Goldensphere that's going to be better, we got to deal with this to head it off, to prevent it, and to give credit to the object of Mrs. Fran Brown's scrutiny. She did say, even if it was for the wrong reasons, and it probably was, based on the evidences to her identity now, she did say once, and I was on that stream, that no, in the black community, black mind is right. The men are held accountable, super accountable, and the women are held above reproach. All the blame is on the men, and all the time the women are held above reproach. And even this was, I remember, because Honor Sweet Ginger was on the same live stream. This is when she was still cool enough to be on those streams. Yeah. So it's got to be talked about. We just don't have to turn it into a war. We got to talk about it in order to avoid that, to keep it outside. I'll give credit where it's due. The object of Fran Brown's scrutiny did not, she said she did not want that gender war in here. And maybe she didn't. Some people may be sitting on evidence that she actually didn't mean that. I don't know. But what she said was correct. But let's be honest, MRM and Golden, who rocked with her because they didn't know this stuff, have stated, and the only evidence about them is that they've been honest. Not always right, because they're human, but honest. They've stated they don't want this war. So I believe them. There's no evidence that they do. Is there evidence that they've been trained and mistrained like everybody else in the States and in the West in general? Yeah, there is. I've seen it. But that's a mistraining. That's everybody. That's across the board. It doesn't make them any worse. But this is important to understand. When you ladies have actually been through the things you have been through, when you've been through these things that these traumas you describe, as long as you're telling the truth and you actually went through these things and you didn't lie about it, you didn't falsely accuse anyone, I ain't tripping. If you're telling the truth about what you went through, you have every right to talk about it, just like we men have the right to talk about the deception through which we went and the trauma of finding out this deception. And a lot of us found out about these deceptions, the mass deceptions, from ladies in our families. It wasn't just women that did us wrong in a mating market, so to speak. No, it's stuff that ladies in the family knew about. Like some of these men sitting up going to church, and the pastor stands up and says what we know that the pastors have said. All you single moms, stand up. All you single brothers, stand. Not single dads, single brothers, stand up. Man up and marry these women, take care of their children. Yeah, this actually happened, according to some witnesses. I saw it on Facebook. More than one man talking about this happening in their churches. I think it was two of them. I don't even know if it was the same church, but what they both said was that many of the men walked the out when this happened. Whether it was the same church or two different ones. This is really going on. And this type of deception, I mean, some of these guys are hearing this from the pastors, but then they even have their moms telling them this stuff. Even then. I know, right? Yeah, tell me about it. So because of this deception, so that most men wind up paying and very few men wind up playing, is why the men are traumatized. And when you are talking about trauma based on things that have actually been done to you that were criminal or just emotionally abusive, if not physically. And when you're talking about these things, what I want you to understand, ladies, is this. There is still a difference, and it doesn't negate your experience as long as you're telling the truth. But that difference is that most of these men have to pay for what a few men could and then were willing to do against you. If you've been abused, if you've been outright violated in the worst of ways, if you've been swindled out your money, if you've taken care of a man that didn't take care of himself, and he drove your car around and was seeing other women and wrecked your car and all that stuff. Whatever these cases were, when you went through these things, you got to understand that most men never would have had access to do these things. Of the men who would have had access, not all of them would have been willing to do these things like abuse you or use you or live off of you or outright violate you. Many men would not be willing to. So you've got a few men, a few of a few, or some percentage of a few who can, and then you got whatever percentage will and is willing, doing these things to most of you ladies. If you sat down and you told the names of these men that maliciously hurt you, not just disappointed you, but maliciously hurt you, oh my God, you probably find about 18 names between y'all. And the rest of the men are told to climb walls or keep a distance or try harder than the last guy in exchange for less from you because of this. And this is where the men come along and say, wait a minute, most of us are actually being treated as inferiors without having done these things that would have made us morally inferior for real. And the men have the right to say this. Not just because it's about some shallow ego. I mean, a lot of women care about this sort of shallow ego validation stuff too. Matter of fact, even more than men are allowed to. But it is about men being treated as equals to other men. And what we're hearing, for the most part, is an unapologetically militant answer telling us we don't have to treat you as well as these men as we treated these men before you. Even when these men did us far worse than what you're doing, we don't have to treat you equally, but you have to make more effort. And you got to accept more of our flaws. That's what we're hearing, and we have to talk about that. Because a lot of you ladies that aren't even saying stuff that's that stupid, well, you're still not necessarily checking some of the ladies who do. Whereas when we hear about these men that do certain things to you, it's already understood. We look at these cases and we say, these men ain't nothing. Even if in high school we might have said, yeah, that's a pimp, we still would have said after a while, yeah, but he's a bum. And that's actually how most of us went through this. Middle school, if you hear about a guy doing this, man, he's a pimp because we're in middle school. High school, man, this ninja's a bum. So why is it he keeps getting hyper selected? And it goes beyond more than just selection. It actually goes into areas of just respect. And in the end, the men are pretty much saying, we demand to be respected equally or respected proportionally to how we'll be treating you. And if we're not your type, then respect us enough to be honest about that and don't ask us for anything. We have to have that talk. I wish I could have made this shorter, and I'm sorry it took almost an hour. I've recorded this about 3 times, trying to do justice to all these topics and do justice to everybody. And I couldn't keep it any shorter than what I did, so I'm sorry about that. Thank you all for listening. I hope this helps. And, as usual, black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Till next time.